Ladies and gentlemen, in a world full of noise, expectations, and endless demands, it's easy to lose yourself trying to please everyone and control everything. But real strength begins when you decide to take your power back, when you choose peace over chaos, reflection over reaction, and self-respect over approval. This speech is a journey back to yourself, a reminder that nobody and nothing should have the power to disturb your inner world again. There comes a point in life where you no longer react. You simply observe. You begin to understand that not everything deserves your energy, your emotions, your voice. You learn that peace is not found in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. The world around you may stay chaotic, but inside, a calm begins to grow. And when that calm takes root, nothing outside of you can shake it. There comes a time in life when you begin to realize that the battle you've been fighting was never the world around you. It was always within. The noise outside, the opinions, the chaos, the distractions, they only had power over you because you allowed them to. For years, maybe even decades, you've been reacting, defending, explaining, trying to make sense of why things happen the way they did, trying to control outcomes, hoping people would change, wishing the world would be softer with you. But slowly, something begins to shift. And it doesn't happen overnight. It starts with a quiet observation. You begin to see how much of your peace has been tied to things you cannot control. You start to notice how your emotions rise and fall based on what someone else says or does. How your mood changes because of a message, a look, a comment, a memory. And the realization hits you. Your energy has been at the mercy of everything external. That's when you start to pull back. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do about yourself, your well-being, your peace. You begin the real work, not the kind that shows on the outside, but the kind that happens in silence, in solitude, in honesty. You begin to sit with yourself, not scroll, not distract, not avoid, but truly sit. And in that sitting, you hear the noise of your own mind. You hear the doubts, the fears, the voices that have been programmed into you since childhood. You don't run from them this time. You listen. And the more you listen, the more you realize those voices are not you. They were placed there by pain, by past experiences, by people who couldn't see your worth. And you start to strip them away, one by one. This is when you begin to master your inner world. When you stop trying to win arguments outside and start making peace inside. You stop chasing closure from people and start giving it to yourself. You stop trying to be understood and start understanding yourself. The power you were looking for was never in how loudly you could speak or how much you could prove. It was always in how deeply you could remain calm when the world is anything but. And now, when something happens, a rejection, an insult, a delay, you feel the energy rise within you, but you don't act on it. You pause. You breathe. You watch it like a wave rising and falling. And you realize this too will pass. Nothing has the right to disrupt your inner peace unless you allow it. You're no longer reactive. You're reflective. You've begun to build a space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your freedom. You stop giving explanations where none are needed. You stop overthinking what they might think. You stop worrying about being liked, accepted, or approved, because now you've accepted yourself. You've liked yourself. You've started walking with yourself as your own companion. And that changes everything. You begin to create boundaries, not as walls, but as respect for your own energy. You learn to say no without guilt, to walk away without drama, to remain silent without feeling weak. Your emotions are no longer running the show. Your awareness is. And in that awareness, you begin to find peace. Not because life is easy, but because you've made yourself strong. People around you might notice the change. Some may misunderstand it. Some may be uncomfortable with it, but it no longer matters, because now you're not living for reaction. You're living from intention. You've anchored yourself in something deeper, your truth, your clarity, your calm. Healing is not a straight path. It twists, it turns, it pulls you under and lifts you up all in the same breath. When you begin to heal deeply, you realize how much of your life was spent chasing after something you thought you needed to feel whole. It wasn't just love or acceptance you were after, it was validation. You wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be understood in ways that you hadn't been before. And without even realizing it, You handed over the power to define your worth to others. Their approval became your mirror. Their opinions became your guide. Their acceptance became your oxygen. But the deeper you heal, the more you recognize how fragile that kind of existence really is. You begin to understand that if your sense of value can rise and fall based on someone else's moods, words, or actions, then you never truly own it in the first place. It was rented. It was borrowed. It was dependent on things outside of you, things you could never fully control. And so the work begins. You start pulling back the projections you place on others. You stop looking outward for confirmation of your worth and start searching inward. You go into the parts of yourself you were once afraid to touch, the memories that made you flinch, the voices that told you you weren't enough, the patterns that kept you running in circles, always seeking, always striving, never arriving. You face them. You hold them. You don't run from them anymore. You sit with the discomfort until the discomfort transforms into understanding. Until you realize there was nothing wrong with you. You were simply looking for something in places that could never give it to you. And as this realization deepens, something inside you shifts. You no longer crave the applause. You no longer need the validation. Compliments are appreciated but not necessary. Criticism is considered but no longer devastating. You move from a place of inner knowing, not outer approval. You start doing things not because you want someone to notice, but because they align with who you are becoming. Your actions, your choices, your words, they all begin to come from a space of authenticity rather than a thirst for recognition. This is the kind of healing that rewires you. It dismantles the old beliefs you once built your life around. It frees you from the exhausting cycles of people-pleasing, approval-seeking, and over-explaining. It brings you back home to yourself. You realize that validation was never supposed to come from the outside. It was always an inner confirmation. A silent knowing that you are enough, that you are valuable, that you are whole, simply because you exist. And when you live from this place, everything changes. Relationships shift. Some fall away. Some deepen. You no longer tolerate disrespect disguised as affection. You no longer bend yourself out of shape to fit into spaces that were never built for you. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You take up space, not arrogantly, but naturally. You understand now that your worth is not negotiable. It doesn't increase when you are praised or decrease when you're criticized. It remains steady, like a deep river running through you, unseen by many but essential to your life force. You find peace in solitude. You find strength in silence. You find joy in simply being, without needing an audience to validate your existence. You begin to move differently in the world. You listen more and defend less. You trust more and chase less. You create more and compare less. Validation no longer holds you captive because you have finally found the freedom of self-acceptance. And that is a kind of power no one can give you and no one can take away. There is a powerful difference between reacting and responding, and that difference lies at the heart of personal mastery. When you react, you are moved by impulse, by emotion, by the unconscious stirrings that have been programmed into you over years of unhealed experiences. Reaction is immediate. It is raw, unfiltered, and often laced with pain. It doesn't pause to think. It doesn't consider the cost. It simply erupts. But response, that is something else entirely. Response comes from reflection. It comes from awareness. It arises not from habit, but from understanding. You begin to recognize this shift the moment you start observing yourself in real time. You notice how certain words trigger you, how certain situations bring back memories that have nothing to do with the present moment. You feel the heat rise in your chest, the tension in your muscles, the quickening of your breath. But instead of lashing out, you pause. That pause is where growth happens. That small moment of stillness between stimulus and action is where your power begins to surface. It's not about suppressing your emotions. It's about seeing them clearly, naming them, understand where they come from. It's about asking yourself, is this moment truly the cause of my pain? Or is it awakening something much older, something unresolved within me? That kind of questioning opens a door to wisdom. And wisdom is what turns reactivity into response. You no longer feel the need to win arguments just to feel heard. You no longer raise your voice to prove your point. You no longer need to dominate a conversation to feel in control. You understand now that true control doesn't come from force. It comes from presence, from the ability to stay centered when everything around you is trying to pull you off balance. When you respond instead of react, you communicate more clearly. You listen not just to reply, but to understand. You no longer take everything personally because you realize that what people say or do is often a reflection of their own inner world, not yours. Their tone, their anger, their silence, their chaos. It's theirs to carry, not yours to absorb. You've grown beyond taking on burdens that don't belong to you. And in this space of response, you gain clarity. You begin to see what's worth your time and what isn't. You begin to understand which conversations deserve your energy and which ones are better left in silence. You don't attend every argument you're invited to. You don't explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You simply observe, choose your response with intention, and move forward with peace. This kind of control is not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It moves quietly, but it changes everything. You may appear calm on the surface, but within you is a strength that can't be shaken. You've trained yourself to stay grounded, to feel without drowning, to care without losing yourself, to express without exploding. And yes, it takes time. It takes patience. It takes failing and trying again. There will be moments when you slip, when a reaction sneaks back in. But now you'll see it. You'll catch it. You'll correct it. And each time you do, you reclaim a piece of your power. You're no longer a puppet of your emotions. You become the observer, the guide, the one who decides how to move forward instead of being dragged backward by old patterns. This is how transformation works, not in sudden bursts, but in small, steady shifts. In the decision, day after day, to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with pain. And that decision, repeated over time, becomes a new way of living, a quieter, stronger, more conscious way of being. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand. It doesn't force its way into a room. That power is peace. The kind of peace that isn't dependent on circumstances, on people, on outcomes. It's not the peace you feel when everything is going right. It's the peace you build when everything around you is uncertain, yet inside you there's stillness. That kind of peace is not given, it's created. And once you've built it, you protect it like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. When you finally understand what your peace is worth, you stop allowing everything and everyone to have access to it. You stop letting people's moods dictate yours. You stop letting distractions pull you into places that drain your energy. You begin to notice how much of your time, your focus, your strength has been scattered across situations that have no real meaning, arguments that lead nowhere, relationships that chip away at your soul. And then you make a quiet decision. No more. You realize that not everything deserves your response. Not every conflict needs your presence. Not every message needs a reply. You start creating distance, not out of anger, but out of respect for your energy. You don't abandon people, but you do begin to choose yourself more often. You stop showing up in spaces where you constantly feel unseen, unheard, or disrespected. And you do it without guilt, because peace is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity. The world doesn't teach you how to protect your peace. It teaches you how to chase approval, how to be busy, how to always be available. But you're not a machine. You are not a product to be consumed. You are a living being with a heart that needs rest, a mind that needs clarity, a soul that needs space. And when you begin to honor those needs, you start to feel whole again. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you isolate yourself from life. It means you engage with life from a place of balance. You learn to pause before you speak, to step back before you react, to check in with yourself before you commit. You make decisions that support your well-being, even if they disappoint others. You stop sacrificing your sanity just to keep the peace with others. Instead, you keep the peace within yourself, even if it causes temporary tension around you. You become aware of your triggers. You become mindful of your energy. You pay attention to the spaces that drain you and the ones that fill you. You no longer romanticize chaos. You stop confusing intensity with connection. You start to crave peace more than attention. You start to value quiet more than noise. You begin to understand that true power is not in controlling others. It's in mastering yourself. And so you move differently. You speak with care. You choose your battles wisely. You stop over-explaining yourself. You let go of the need to be right all the time. You realize that not everything requires a reaction. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Some things are better left in silence. Some things are better left behind. The people who truly value you will notice your shift and respect it. The ones who are only drawn to your chaos will slowly fade away. You won't need to explain your growth. You'll just live it. And in that space, in that quiet, in that grounded place within you, peace becomes your power. It becomes your protection. It becomes the most valuable thing you own. There's a strength that comes from knowing who you are, not just on the surface, but deep beneath the noise of the world. It's not about the roles you play or the labels others have given you. It's not about how you appear, how much you achieve, or how many people approve of you. It's about being rooted in your truth, in your values, in your essence. When you are truly grounded in who you are, you become unshakable. The storms still come, but they don't move you the way they used to. You don't bend just to be accepted. You don't change your shape just to fit in. You stand as you are, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. You spend enough time being pulled in different directions by other people's expectations. Enough time silencing yourself to avoid conflict. Enough time shrinking to make others feel comfortable. There comes a point when you stop looking outside for direction and begin turning inward. You start asking yourself, what do I truly value? What do I believe in? What kind of life do I want to create? And the more you answer those questions honestly, the more solid you become. You stop living on borrowed opinions. You stop outsourcing your identity. You reclaim the parts of yourself you once gave away for approval. It's not always easy to stay rooted in yourself. The world has a way of pulling you away, through comparison, through criticism, through distraction. But when you've done the work to build a strong foundation within, those things no longer hold the same power. You begin to respond to life from a place of intention rather than insecurity. You make decisions that align with your values, even when they're inconvenient. You say no without explanation. You say yes without hesitation. You move with clarity, not confusion. This inner grounding becomes your compass. It guides you when things are uncertain. It steadies you when emotions run high. It reminds you who you are when others try to define you. You no longer react to every opinion, every judgment, every wave of emotion. You observe. You choose. You stay centered. That kind of self-possession is rare, and it changes the way you experience the world. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop chasing things that aren't meant for you. You no longer need to force anything to happen. You trust yourself enough to wait. You trust life enough to release. You trust your path enough to keep walking, even when it's lonely, even when it's quiet, even when it's misunderstood. Because when you are rooted in who you are, you no longer seek validation at every turn. You already know, and in this knowing, you find peace. You begin to attract people and opportunities that resonate with your truth. You stop entertaining what doesn't. You create a life that reflects your values instead of one built on compromise. You become aligned. And alignment brings ease, not because life is always easy, but because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're no longer torn between who you are and who the world wants you to be. You've chosen yourself. You walk into rooms with quiet confidence. You listen more than you speak. You move with purpose. You don't rush. You don't chase. You don't beg. You trust that what's meant for you will find you, and you release everything else. This is what it means to be rooted, to live from your center, to know that no matter what comes or goes, you remain whole.